Was Max Verstappen's 2025 season the best season by a driver without winning the World Championship in F1 history? It's an interesting question, isn't it? And one I'm going to try to answer in this video. Verstappen missed out on the title by just 2 points to Lando Norris, having been more than 100 points behind, with 9 races still left to run, making it one of the most remarkable title challenges we have seen in recent times, and a year that Max said was his best yet. He didn't think he'd win a race in the second half of the season, let alone fight for the championship, but Red Bull's turnaround was nothing short of outstanding, even if they just fell short of the title in the end. So Verstappen's late surge to work his way into title contention and take the fight all the way down to the final race got me thinking if him nearly completing the comeback of all comebacks makes his 2025 campaign the best ever not to win a championship. Well, there's many to choose from, so I've narrowed it down to some select personal choices. So here's my list of contenders, and don't forget to let me know your picks in the comments. Let's start with the man himself, because it was a year that only elevated Max's reputation even further after his recent dominant streak, and has left us in no doubt about who the best driver is in F1 right now. Despite not having the best car on the grid, he still managed to somehow win more races than anyone, with 8 altogether, and 6 of those came in the last 10 races, which only highlights how incredible Max's form was after the summer break. He too scored more pole positions than his rivals, with 8 across the year, and some of them were just sensational. Japan and Silverstone are the ones that jump out to me, because he should never have been on pole in the first place on weekends where he clearly didn't have the best car. His first half and second half of the season were complete contrasts in terms of both results and form. He only scored 5 podiums in the first 14 races, whereas he didn't finish off the podium from August to December, and he also led more laps than anybody. Some of his drives this year were just off the scale, winning at Imola with that ballsy overtake on Piastri at turn 1, complete domination at Monza that really kick-started his fight back, and then Brazil just topped the lot going from pit lane to P3. Given how far back he was to the McLarens, mainly because of Red Bull's car deficiency, but also a couple of mistakes on his part, everybody wrote off Verstappen from fighting for the title, but the gap just kept closing every race before he had a real shot at winning a 5th title in a row. In the end, he came within 2 points of winning another championship, but it was a season which he could be proud of, to have come from being well out of contention to right in the title picture at the very end. It was a Max masterclass. Some believe to this day that 1993 was Ayrton Senna's best season in Formula 1, hence why I've included it in this list, because I can see why many people have this opinion. Senna had won all of his 3 world titles at this point, but he was up against the all-dominant, all-conquering Williams car, which had its clever active suspension and electronic driver aids, so winning a 4th title was already too much of a stretch. But that didn't stop him giving it a good go, and even with a customer Ford engine, he still managed to win 5 races across the season and finished runner-up in the championship to his bitter rival Alain Prost, who dominated the season and won his 4th world title. Even though the McLaren was not on the same level as the Williams, Senna was actually leading the championship after 4 races, but then Prost and Williams got into their stride and ran away with both championships. But what made 93 stand out for Senna was some of his performances. Winning on home soil for a second time in Brazil in mixed conditions, that legendary opening lap and drive in the wet at Donington, a record 6th victory at Monaco, and 2 further victories in Japan and Adelaide, which turned out to be his last ever in F1. Even if Ayrton had a mid-season blip where he finished off the podium in 8 successive races, those wins alone are why this season is so highly regarded. He should never have had a prayer to fight for wins and have a glimpse of a title challenge in those early races. But he gave Williams some real problems that season, and he drove like a true champion. How Michael drove that car, I will never know. That quote from Eddie Irvine about Michael Schumacher's 1996 season doesn't just summarise his genius, but also shows how incredible that year was for him, despite having to drive a dog of a car. This was Schumacher's first season driving in red, having left Benetton, where he won his 2 world championships, and it looked as though it was going to be a very tough year because the car was slow and off the pace, so any thought of challenging for the title was over before the first race. But Michael did not give in. He worked and worked to try and make the Ferrari more competitive, even if it did not deserve to be racing at the front of the grid. By the fifth race at Imola, he somehow put the car on pole for the first time, and he would do so again another 3 times that year. But in Spain, a couple of races later, that's where he made an even bigger impression. In appalling conditions, the kind of which Schumacher thrived in throughout his whole career, he made the entire field look amateurish. He finished over 40 seconds ahead of them and won for the first time for Ferrari. That drive is still considered to this day to be one of his very best. He would win so again at Spa and Monza, so 1996 was about Michael's sheer brilliance behind the wheel and working around the problems that the Ferrari car had, and in the end finishing third in the standings behind both Williams drivers, which was quite an achievement. We're moving into the 21st century now, and unlike Senna and Schumacher, this driver could, would and probably should have won the championship had factors outside of his control not played such a key role in the title battle. 2005, in my opinion, was Kimi Raikkonen's best season in F1, because when you think of Pete Kimi, you think of him in that MP4-20. The two of them were such a good combination, and the car just suited him to a T. He won 7 races that year, bagged 5 pole positions and scored 10 fastest laps. In any other year, those stats would probably be enough to win the championship. But unfortunately for Raikkonen, he could not match his rival that year, Fernando Alonso. Fernando and Kimi drove like champions all year. Both of them would have deserved to have been the champion, but Alonso's consistency is what proved decisive in him being able to beat Kimi to the title that year. The problem for Kimi was, even though the McLaren was faster on paper than the Renault, reliability was the Achilles heel. 3 times that year, he was leading the race and retired with a mechanical issue. And he was constantly starting 10 places further back because he'd keep changing his engine. So that cost him dearly, and just like 2003, he finished runner-up. But even though he missed out on the title, some of his performances in 2005 were insane. His drive in Spain was unbelievable. Nobody could match his lap times. He was in a complete league of his own. His Monaco pole lap was arguably the best of the season, nearly half a second quicker than the rest of the field. And then, of course, his greatest ever drive, going from 17th to 1st in Japan, passing Fisichella on the final lap. Kimi deserves so much more that year. He had the car, but he just did not have the luck. Even so, I do think in many ways he was the People's Champion of 2005, but that's the way it just goes sometimes. Alonso ironically features next on my list. Still going strong at 44 years old, you could list several seasons from his career where he drove out of his skin and outperformed the car that he had at his disposal. But we can only choose one, and it simply has to be that near miss in 2012 during his period at Ferrari, where he came close on a couple of occasions to winning the title. But that year was one that he truly deserved and should have won had it not been for bad luck. The 2012 Ferrari is among the worst cars that they have ever designed. Not only was it ugly, but it was clear from the get-go that it was a car that was nowhere near quick enough to be able to compete when it hit the track for the first time, so it looked as though it was going to be a painful year. And yet somehow Alonso was dragging the car to results that it didn't deserve. The first of his 3 wins that season came in Malaysia, where he was hounded by the Sauber of Perez, and it says a lot that Sauber had a quicker car than Ferrari and should have won, but somehow he held on. But even when the car was drastically improved with a major upgrade in Spain, you still couldn't consider it championship worthy. But Alonso's skill and talent was getting the most out of the car. He was able to extract every ounce of potential that it had. I suppose the drive that you think of when you go back to Alonso's 2012 season was that recovery drive from 11th in Valencia. The way that he cut through the field that day was the drive of a champion. It was something amazing. We were witnessing greatness. Even in an inferior car, Alonso just kept racking up the points and building a lead in the championship. He was more than 40 points ahead at the summer break. But then the first case of bad luck happened at Spa when he was caught up in that big pile-up at the first corner caused by Grosjean. Then the second case of bad luck was at Suzuka when he was clipped by Raikkonen on the run to turn 1 and damaged his left rear tyre. Those were the only 2 races that he didn't score points in 2012. Even as other teams brought upgrades and Ferrari fell further back, Alonso was still in contention and went to the final race in a battle with Sebastian Vettel to be crowned world champion with just 13 points separating them. He finished ahead of Vettel in the final race in Brazil, but he came up just 3 points shy of winning the title. But like I said with Raikkonen, Alonso was the People's Champion of that year. He outperformed the car all year long, consistently scored points and podiums that should never have been possible, or what might have been had it not been for those 2 cases of bad luck. We end with the most successful driver in Formula 1 history. Lewis Hamilton may have 7 World Championships to his name, but he could have had more. He missed out in 2007, 2010, 2012 and 2016 for various reasons, but for me there's one other near miss that beats the lot of them. 2021 is one of the greatest seasons in living memory. The battle between Hamilton and Verstappen that year, it will be talked about for centuries. They were head and shoulders above the rest, and they gave us a thrilling title battle that went all the way down to the wire. Hamilton had won the last 4 World Championships, but Verstappen had finally been given a car by Red Bull that was capable of fighting for the title. Bahrain set the tone for the season as they fought each other for the win down to the final laps, but Hamilton came out on top, so round 1 went to him. Then Lewis had the upper hand in the first 4 races until Verstappen turned things around and managed to stretch out a lead of 32 points by Silverstone, so Mercedes had to respond. And they did, but controversy clouded Hamilton's comeback win at Silverstone after he and Verstappen collided on the first lap. And the rest of the season was just a straight fight between them both, fighting for every point available, with no one able to build a comfortable lead. Momentum just kept swinging back and forth. They collided for a second time at Monza, but then it felt as though Max had one hand on the title with 4 races remaining, but then Hamilton won 3 races in a row, coming out on top in a fiery head-to-head duel with Max in Saudi Arabia to go into the final race tied on points. Hamilton was on course to win the championship, which would have been a record 8th when that controversial finish played out in Abu Dhabi, when Verstappen passed him on the final lap to not only win the race but win the title in the most dramatic and controversial fashion. Lewis had 2 less wins than Verstappen, had 5 fewer poles and 2 less podiums in 2021, and yet somehow he still managed to fight down to the very final lap of the season for the championship. Like always, he never gave up. He overcame every setback thrown at him. He only missed out on the title through circumstances out of his control. Now that we've gone through some of the best titleless seasons, is Verstappen's the one that trumps the lot, or is there one that eclipses it? There's no doubt that what Max did this year was legendary. Nobody could have done what he did to come back from such a big deficit and almost complete the greatest comeback ever seen. It fully deserves to be mentioned among these other incredible seasons that I've included in this video. But Verstappen said himself, the only reason that he was in the fight in the first place was down to luck and also McLaren's mistakes that brought him into contention. They should have won the title far easier than they did. They had the best car, but they continuously shot themselves in the foot, and Verstappen took full advantage of that. So because McLaren's incompetence helped Max fight for the title, no, I don't think it's the best non-title winning season in F1 history. Instead, for me, it has to be Alonso's 2012 season for the opposite reasons in many ways. Alonso only lost out on the championship that year through bad luck in incidents that he did not cause. He was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. But more than that, the Ferrari was on average the 4th fastest car that season, so it had absolutely no right to fight for the championship, which only coats Alonso's season in more glory, the fact that he was a contender right up until the final race. And that for me is enough of a winning argument to make this head and shoulders above the rest. Well guys, there you have it. That is it for today's video. Be sure to like the video, and if you are new around here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching guys, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.